Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my channel? Thank you so much. It's strange the things that stay with you. Out of all the words my father has thrown at me over the years, some sharp as broken glass, others cold enough to make your breath catch, it was one sentence that never left me. One sentence he said last fall, like mother, like failure. He didn't even flinch when he said it, just stared at my son with that same hollow look he always gave me growing up, like disappointment was baked into our DNA. That moment replayed in my head 100 times, but it wasn't until last week, standing in a crowded middle school gym surrounded by blinking science projects and hand-painted trifold boards, that it came full circle. My son Lucas stood silently by his invention, no tears, no anger, no comeback, just calm stillness. Then he reached forward and plugged in the device. What came next silenced an entire room. But before I tell you what played, I need you to know who we are. I need you to understand what led to that moment. My name is Claire Hamilton. I'm 38, a single mother, and I've spent the past 12 years doing everything I can to raise 2 kids with more compassion than I ever received. Lucas is my oldest. He's 12 now, soft-spoken and sharp as a tack. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, every word is thoughtful and deliberate. His little sister Emily is 9 and full of fire. She's always been the one to speak up, while Lucas is the one who listens and remembers everything. We live in a quiet suburb outside of Chicago. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours. After my husband died in a car accident 6 years ago, I promised myself that I wouldn't let my grief or my past define me. But some ghosts don't respect boundaries, and my father, Edward Mason, is one of them. He's the kind of man who walks into a room and makes the temperature drop 10 degrees. When I was little, I used to think he was the smartest man in the world. Now I know he's just the loudest. He sees emotion as weakness and failure as genetic. He never hit us, but he didn't need to. His words were weapons, and they left marks you can't show to anyone. I hadn't planned on inviting him to Lucas's science fair, but he heard about it through my brother Jake and insisted on coming. I just want to support the boy, he said. I didn't believe him. I should have said no, but some part of me, even now, still wants to believe he can change. When he arrived at the gym that afternoon, the energy shifted. Lucas was standing beside his project, an intricate device made from salvaged electronics and 3D printed components, something he'd poured months of work into. He called it a truth amplifier. I thought it was a clever metaphor for his desire to bring clarity to the world. My father took one look at it and laughed, loud and dismissive, the kind of laugh that makes people stop and look. He leaned toward Lucas and with that cold, sharp voice said, "What is this, some kind of toy?" Then he turned to me, like Lucas wasn't even standing there, and muttered, like mother, like failure. I felt it in my gut, like I was 13 again, standing in. I was in our kitchen listening to him tell me I'd never amount to anything because I wanted to write stories instead of study engineering. I looked at Lucas expecting tears, a reaction, but he didn't flinch. His face was unreadable. Then, without saying a word, he reached down and flipped the switch on his project. Wires lit up. A small speaker clicked on, static buzz for a moment, and then a voice began to speak, my father's voice. And that's when everything changed. Behind every silence, there was a hidden truth. Growing up under my father's roof, I learned early on that silence was safer than speaking up. I remember how we moved through our home like shadows, careful not to disturb the fragile calm that settled in the rooms he inhabited. It felt as though my brother Jake and I spent half our childhood holding our breath. But my mother, Sarah, was different. She brought light to our home, warmth to rooms chilled by my father's criticisms. She would smile and wink at me when his voice grew sharp, quietly reminding me that his words did not have to define me. Her presence was the only barrier between us and the constant coldness he exuded. Then, one rainy night when I was 16, a police officer knocked on our door, badge in hand. Mom was gone, a car accident, they said. Suddenly, that fragile warmth vanished, replaced by the heavy, oppressive shadow of grief. Without my mother's gentle protection, my father's harshness consumed every corner of our lives. I left home at 18, determined to find my own warmth again. Life wasn't always gentle with me, but it taught me resilience. It led me to love, loss, motherhood, and eventually single motherhood after my husband died suddenly, leaving me alone with our 2 young children. I thought briefly about calling my father for support, but I never did. I knew he would view my situation as validation of his judgments about me, that I was destined for failure. Instead, I learned to depend only on myself. Each night, after putting Lucas and Emily to bed, I'd sit at our kitchen table, exhausted but resolute, figuring out how to provide, how to reassure them that despite our losses, we were whole. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and we had love, something I vowed to give them freely, abundantly, unconditionally. Lucas grew quieter after his father's death, retreating into himself. He built intricate creations out of spare parts, old circuit boards, wires from broken lamps, gears from discarded toys. Science was his refuge. It was his way of making sense of a world that had repeatedly shown itself to be chaotic and unfair. While other kids played baseball or video games, Lucas buried himself in projects, his gentle hands shaping order from the disorder around him. Emily, on the other hand, was fearless. She danced through life, quick to laughter and quicker still to defend her brother whenever anyone questioned or teased his quiet nature. Sometimes at night, through the thin walls of our small home, I'd hear Emily's voice, soft but fierce, whispering encouragement to Lucas. He was his biggest advocate. They protected each other in ways Jake and I never learned to as children. When Lucas told me he wanted to enter the science fair, my heart swelled with pride and worry. I knew how cruel others could be when they didn't understand. Still, I encouraged him, promising myself that I would shield him from anyone who dared diminish his brilliance. But when Jake casually mentioned the fair to our father, everything changed. Edward Mason, never one to miss an opportunity to judge, insisted on attending. "It's important I see what you've been doing with my grandchildren," he said, the implication clear. The night before the science fair, I found Lucas in the garage, surrounded by scattered components and blinking lights. His dark eyes met mine, his expression thoughtful, almost troubled. "Are you okay?" I asked gently, kneeling beside him. "You don't have to do this if it's too much pressure." Lucas shook his head slowly. "No, Mom, I need to do this. It matters." There was something in his voice, calm yet weighted, that gave me pause. I realized then that quiet Lucas was ready for something, though I didn't yet understand what. The next afternoon, as we arrived at the school gymnasium filled with excited chatter and hopeful faces, I saw Lucas's quiet strength in action. He set up his display carefully, precisely, his hands steady. Emily bounced nearby, proudly handing out flyers she'd drawn herself, announcing her brother's truth amplifier. Then the door swung open, and my father entered. I felt that old familiar chill settle over me again. Edward's gaze met mine, and I saw in his eyes the same skepticism, the same disapproval I'd known all my life. But Lucas simply straightened his shoulders, took a slow breath, and waited, silent and composed. In that quiet, poised moment, I understood my son was no longer the frightened child I once knew. He was stronger. He was ready, and so was I. His words stung deep, but Lucas never said a thing. The gymnasium hummed with excitement, filled with nervous laughter, hushed whispers, and the vibrant energy of families gathered around tables decorated with bright posters and homemade inventions. It was Lucas's big day, the culmination of months of careful planning, precise measurements, and late-night tinkering in the dim glow of his bedroom desk lamp. Lucas stood beside his science project, neatly adjusting the wires and smoothing out the explanatory notes carefully taped to his display board. The device, the truth amplifier, was small and unassuming, an intricate collection of circuits and a sleek black speaker box. To outsiders, it might have seemed modest, even forgettable. But to Lucas and to me, it represented so much more. It was his voice, his resilience, shaped from pieces of discarded electronics, just as he had built his identity from fragments of challenges and quiet victories. I stood a few feet back, watching Lucas closely, feeling a mother's pride swell inside me, tempered only by the familiar anxiety of knowing Edward Mason. My father was somewhere behind me, ready to judge. Emily bounced excitedly around Lucas's table, proudly introducing her brother's project to anyone who paused long enough to listen. "It's amazing! Lucas built it all himself. You should see what it does." Her enthusiasm, bright and sincere, attracted a small crowd. For a moment, I allowed myself a breath of hope. Lucas smiled shyly, answering questions quietly but confidently, explaining the simple yet profound idea behind his invention. "It amplifies the truth," he said. "It records what people say, then plays it back clearly. No distortions, no misunderstandings." That's when Edward stepped forward, cutting through the warmth of the moment like a blade slicing through paper. He stared down at Lucas's table, his gaze narrow, his lips curled slightly at the corners with disdain. I felt my heartbeat quicken, bracing myself. Lucas glanced up at his grandfather, his hopeful expression fading as Edward spoke loudly enough for others to overhear. "What exactly is this supposed to prove?" "Lucas, it seems like nothing more than a glorified tape recorder." Edward's voice dripped with condescension, making the gathered audience shift uncomfortably. "You spent months on this?" I moved instinctively forward, placing a gentle hand on Lucas's shoulder, feeling him stiffen slightly under my touch. But Lucas did not speak. Instead, he stared silently at the device in front of him. Edward seemed irritated by Lucas's silence, annoyed at being ignored. His eyes hardened as he turned sharply toward me. "Well, Claire, looks like he's following right in your footsteps. You always did chase worthless ideas, didn't you?" His voice lowered, venomous enough that only those close could hear, yet loud enough to wound. "Like mother, like failure." Those words landed like a blow to my chest. Heat rushed to my face as memories flooded me, familiar humiliation clawing its way back. I could hear murmurs spreading among the parents and teachers nearby, confusion mixing with awkward sympathy. Emily's bright smile faded, replaced by angry tears. She glared fiercely at her grandfather, fists clenched at her sides. But Lucas remained perfectly still, eerily calm. His eyes, now fixed firmly on Edward, revealed no anger or hurt, only quiet intensity. There was strength in his silence, a strength that I never found in myself at his age. Edward's eyes flickered uneasily at Lucas's silence, unsettled by his grandson's calm defiance. He was accustomed to immediate reactions: fear, submission, tears. Lucas gave him nothing. The crowd, sensing a drama unfolding, lingered closer, intrigued yet uneasy. My brother Jake, standing nearby, shot me a worried glance, silently questioning whether to intervene. Uncle Martin moved closer, his usual humor replaced by quiet concern. The tension was suffocating. In that painful silence, Lucas carefully adjusted a wire and reached beneath the table. Everyone's eyes followed him as he calmly and deliberately plugged the small power cord into the socket. The device hummed. Med gently to life, the soft blue glow of an indicator light pulsing steadily. Edward scoffed again, dismissing the device with a wave. "It doesn't matter what you plug it into, Lucas. You can't build something worth." He never finished his sentence. A sharp crackle from the speaker interrupted him, drawing everyone's attention instantly to the sleek black box. The noise faded, replaced clearly by the unmistakable sound of Edward Mason's voice, a recording captured in perfect crystal-clear fidelity. The words that echoed through the gymnasium stunned everyone into absolute silence. Lucas's invention had just amplified a truth no one expected and one my father hoped no one would hear. Lucas made a choice, quiet and powerful, and the truth began to speak. In those seconds following my father's stinging words, everything seemed frozen. The quiet hum of conversation that had previously filled the gymnasium evaporated into an awkward, charged silence. Teachers stopped mid-step, parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, and Lucas stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable, his hand resting lightly beside the quietly humming speaker. My mind raced, desperate to protect my son, yet paralyzed by the weight of my father's presence and the cruelty of his words. I opened my mouth, prepared to speak, to shield Lucas with my words or actions, yet something stopped me. It was Lucas himself, still calm, poised, and surprisingly resolute, his eyes locked firmly onto his grandfather's face. I recognized that look in Lucas's eyes, quiet courage born of countless silent battles he'd fought alone. This wasn't my fight to take from him. My heart swelled with fierce pride and apprehensive curiosity. What was Lucas about to do? My father stood there, arms folded tightly across his chest, an arrogant challenge written plainly across his features. Edward Mason had always thrived on intimidating others into silence or submission, but Lucas was not afraid. He was ready. It was as if every experience he'd endured, every whispered encouragement from Emily, every late-night discussion we'd shared had led him precisely here. Without breaking eye contact with his grandfather, Lucas calmly adjusted the dial on his device, a small motion precise enough to suggest he'd practiced it dozens of times. I noticed Emily moved closer, her eyes wide with anticipation, fists clenched, hoping her brother could reclaim this moment. Lucas gently lifted his chin, taking a steadying breath that resonated deeply through me. Then in the same quiet, measured manner, he approached everything. He reached forward and pressed a small button on the side of his truth amplifier. The soft static quickly gave way, clear and sharp. Edward's voice filled the space around us, carrying loudly enough for everyone to hear. It took only a moment for everyone to realize what they were hearing, a conversation recorded unintentionally just a few days earlier when Edward had come over unannounced. Initially, the playback sounded harmless enough, Edward asking me questions. Questions about Lucas's progress, his school, his projects, but soon the casual inquiries shifted subtly, his voice steeped in disdainful skepticism. "Claire, let's be honest, Lucas isn't going anywhere. You're filling his head with nonsense. Science projects? Really? He needs discipline, not encouragement for pointless hobbies." The recording was crystal clear, mercilessly amplifying the contempt in Edward's voice. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Lucas's classmates and their parents registered the meaning of the conversation they were hearing. My father's confident posture suddenly wavered. I watched him closely, something I rarely dared to do, and saw a flicker of uncertainty, a vulnerability he never intended anyone else to see. The playback continued. Edward's voice mocked me openly, unaware that Lucas's device had been recording him through an open window. Your mother filled your head with dreams, Claire, and look where it got her, dead and forgotten. You're doing exactly the same to Lucas. It's pathetic. Each word hit with merciless precision. Teachers turned pale, parents shifted uncomfortably, their eyes wide. Jake and Martin exchanged shocked glances, caught between anger and sadness. Emily moved even closer to Lucas, her small hand reaching for his sleeve in silent solidarity. Edward's face drained of color, his eyes flickering around the room as whispers of disbelief spread. He opened his mouth as if to speak but found no words, his bluster extinguished. Lucas calmly pressed the button again, gently silencing the playback, restoring an unsettling quiet to the gym. His gaze met mine, steady and mature beyond his 12 years. In that brief look, he communicated more clearly than words ever could. He had not done this from spite or anger, but from the unyielding determination to speak a truth long suppressed. He had used his gift, the very creativity Edward dismissed, to defend both himself and me. I stepped forward, placing my hand again on Lucas's shoulder, feeling the quiet strength that had just reshaped our family's story. Emily stood protectively at his side, fiercely proud. My brother Jake nodded solemnly, offering silent encouragement. For the first time, Lucas smiled softly, just a faint curve of lips, but it spoke volumes. Edward, utterly defeated by his own words, simply stood there, unable to move or speak. The man who had spent decades silencing others had finally been silenced by a quiet, brilliant 12-year-old boy who chose courage over submission. Lucas had taken his stand. The truth had spoken loudly and clearly, and nothing would ever be the same again. When the truth echoed, silence followed, and everything changed. The gymnasium had never felt quieter. Nearly 200 people stood utterly still, their breaths suspended, eyes fixed anxiously on the small black speaker that had just reshaped the reality of everyone present. Lucas's quiet strength had lifted a veil, revealing the raw truth behind my father's carefully crafted facade. Edward Mason, the man who had dominated every room he entered with judgment and disdain, stood exposed, stripped bare by his own words. Edward stood stiffly, visibly trembling, his earlier arrogance now completely vanished. His eyes darted desperately around the room, looking for some form of escape, but there was none. For the first time, he had nowhere to hide. The weight of silence stretched uncomfortably, broken only by faint murmurs of shock and disbelief. Teachers glanced awkwardly at one another, uncertain of how to proceed. Other parents shielded their children, embarrassed or sympathetic, unable to look away from the spectacle. Lucas stepped forward again, his hand still resting gently on the device that had revealed everything. He did not flinch or shrink under the attention. Instead, he spoke calmly, his voice clear and steady, carrying authority far beyond his age. This was never about embarrassing anyone, Lucas said quietly, looking directly at his grandfather with an expression free of malice. I built this because truth matters. My mom taught me that, and even if it hurts, hiding it is worse. Lucas paused, his dark eyes now shifting to meet mine. I saw vulnerability there, but also deep resolve. I didn't know exactly what I'd recorded until yesterday, but once I did, I realized I couldn't pretend it wasn't there. A rush of emotion gripped my throat. I'd always tried to protect Lucas from pain, from harsh realities, but here he stood, willingly stepping forward into discomfort because he knew instinctively that some truths must be faced. Edward took a shaky step toward Lucas, his face pale, his voice coming out unsteady, stripped of its usual confidence. Lucas, I didn't mean. Lucas raised his hand gently, silencing his grandfather's stammering attempt at apology. You did mean it, every word. But that's why I had to play it. Not just to make you admit it, but so you could finally see what your words do to people. Edward swallowed hard, stunned and speechless by Lucas's unexpected maturity. It was evident, watching the two generations facing each other in the tense quiet of the gymnasium, that the power dynamic had shifted permanently. The principal, Miss Collins, finally stepped forward, clearing her throat to reclaim control. Her voice was gentle, respectful, yet firm. Perhaps it would be best if we conclude for now. Lucas, thank you for sharing your project with us and for your bravery. Edward, I suggest you reflect on what's happened here today. Edward nodded weakly, unable to argue. He looked shattered, reduced from an imposing figure to a frail, confused man confronted by the consequences of his lifelong harshness. Teachers and other parents gradually began whispering quietly again, the oppressive silence gradually lifting, replaced by a cautious, reflective buzz of conversation. Lucas quietly unplugged his device, carefully gathering his wires and tools. Emily rushed to his side, fiercely hugging her brother, her eyes wide, proud tears shining on her cheeks. Gently squeezing Lucas's shoulder in wordless respect, Uncle Martin gave a silent approving nod. I turned to my father one last time. Edward, visibly shaken, caught my gaze and approached slowly, shoulders slumped. He was broken, humbled, humanized by his own harsh truths. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible, trembling. "Claire, I'm sorry. Truly, I had no idea how cruel I'd become." His apology didn't erase years of hurt, but for the first time in my memory, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. In that moment, my anger softened just slightly, replaced by cautious hope. I knew forgiveness wouldn't come easily, but maybe finally healing could begin. Lucas stood beside me, quietly watching this small exchange unfold, sensing my complicated emotions. I placed my hand on his shoulder, gently comforted by his quiet presence. Without a word, Lucas had done something extraordinary. He had confronted generations of hidden wounds, shattered the facade of silence, and perhaps finally started the process of healing our fractured family. As we left the gym together, Lucas carrying his truth-telling invention in his careful hands, I realized something profound. The quietest among us often carry the loudest truths, and when spoken courageously, those truths can change everything. Lucas, in his silent strength, had done exactly that. Healing began with truth, courage, and quiet strength. The days following Lucas's powerful revelation felt strangely surreal, as if we were all slowly waking from a long, troubled dream. Life went on, school days, dinner conversations, chores. But something significant had changed. Lucas's courage had transformed more than just a single moment. It had shifted the very fabric of our family. Edward had always been a distant, cold presence, but after the science fair, his familiar harshness faded, replaced by silence and introspection. The man who had once dictated reality to everyone around him had finally seen himself clearly for perhaps the first time. Though I couldn't instantly forgive all the pain he'd caused, for once I saw genuine remorse in his eyes, and it mattered. One afternoon, about a week after the fair, Edward unexpectedly knocked on our door. He stood awkwardly on the porch holding a small toolbox. "Claire, could I speak to Lucas for a moment?" His voice was gentle, tentative, unrecognizable from the commanding figure of my childhood. Lucas approached slowly, quietly regarding his grandfather. Emily hovered protectively nearby, watching cautiously. Edward cleared his throat nervously. "I came to apologize, Lucas. Not just words this time. I want you to have this." He opened the toolbox, revealing carefully organized electronic components, neatly arranged wires, small motors, and delicate circuit boards. "I was wrong about you, about everything really. Your inventions, your ideas, they're not worthless, they're brilliant." Lucas took the toolbox slowly, carefully examining the contents. He looked back at Edward, his expression softening. He nodded gently, accepting not just the gift, but the sincerity behind it. Edward turned toward me, hesitating slightly before speaking again. "Claire, I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I'd like the chance to try." I studied his expression carefully, weighing decades of pain against the earnestness of this moment. My father was imperfect, deeply flawed, but perhaps now genuinely open to change. I spoke softly, honestly. "I can't promise forgiveness right now, but I'm willing to give you the chance to earn it. Not for me, but for Lucas and Emily." Edward nodded slowly, relieved. For the first time in my memory, he seemed genuinely grateful for the opportunity, understanding fully that trust in healing would take time. After he left, Lucas quietly took the toolbox into his room, Emily trailing curiously behind him. I stood in the hallway, my heart filled with complicated emotions. Pain, hope, uncertainty, gratitude, all mixed together. My brother Jake called later that evening, sensing my need to talk through everything. As usual, his steady presence anchored me. "Claire," Jake said gently, "Edward might never become the father we always needed, but maybe, just maybe, he'll finally learn how to be a decent grandfather." Lucas changed something important in him, something none of us could ever reach. He was right. Lucas's quiet strength had shifted something fundamental, not just in Edward but in all of us. That night, after the house fell quiet, I found Lucas sitting at his desk, carefully sorting through the parts Edward had given him. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" I asked softly, leaning against his doorway. Lucas paused thoughtfully, holding a small circuit board carefully in his fingers. "I think so, Mom. It feels different now, like maybe we can start over somehow." My eyes filled unexpectedly with tears, not of sadness but gratitude. I'm proud of you, Lucas, more than you know. You did something incredibly brave, and I admire you so much for it. Lucas smiled gently, shyly meeting my gaze. I just wanted him to understand you, me, all of us. Truth is hard, but it feels better when it's finally out. I hugged him tightly, feeling the quiet strength radiating from him. Lucas, my quiet boy, had become a hero, not through noise or anger, but by simply standing firm in truth. Weeks turned to months, and slowly Edward became a cautious, respectful presence in our lives. Never perfect, but noticeably changed. Emily warmed to him gradually, testing the waters of a new relationship. Lucas remained guarded but open, giving Edward a chance to earn back trust piece by careful piece. I watched it all unfold, amazed by how healing, even fragile and uncertain, had begun simply with truth and courage. Lucas had shown all of us something powerful, that sometimes silence is not weakness, but a profound strength waiting patiently to be recognized. One evening, months later, Lucas proudly showed me a new invention, a small elegant device designed not to record harsh truths but to gently remind us each day of our strength, value, and courage. He named it simply Clarity. I smiled deeply, understanding the profound meaning behind his choice. Lucas had taught me, and all of us, that healing begins when truth meets courage, guided by quiet strength. In that quiet, powerful understanding, our family had finally begun to heal. Lucas smiled gently, pressing the button on Clarity. My voice echoed softly, a gentle recording he had secretly captured. You're stronger than you think, Lucas. I believe in you. As my words filled the quiet room, Lucas looked up, his eyes shining with quiet pride. I squeezed his shoulder softly, understanding finally and fully that truth spoken bravely has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Sometimes quiet courage speaks loudest of all. Thank you so much for taking this emotional journey with me. Sharing Lucas's story wasn't easy, but it's a reminder that courage can show itself in quiet yet powerful ways. Sometimes all it takes to break a painful cycle is a single moment of brave honesty and the strength to stand firm when the truth needs to be heard. If this story touched your heart, please like the video. It helps these meaningful stories reach more people who might need to hear them. Comment below and tell me, have you ever faced a moment when speaking your truth changed everything? I read every comment, and your stories inspire me deeply. Don't forget to share this video with someone you believe needs courage or hope today. Together, we can encourage more people to embrace their truths and find strength in their silence. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. Your support allows me to keep sharing powerful stories that bring us closer, reminding us that no one has to face life's hardest moments alone. Remember, your story matters. Thank you for being here. Until next time, stay courageous and stay